And then, my next question for you is what the role that you want me to take. I could be fielding questions in the chat and then give them to you after. I could leave you completely alone. I could be a figment until you need something, and then you just go, Lainey, could you blah, 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 blah. It's up to you how I could help you facilitate this awesome thing.
We've tasked Dorian with the question stuff, so no worries to do that. And yeah, just chill out unless like
chill out
if there's some emergency, we'll call on Lainey Powers. But otherwise,
or Danny,
enjoy
who
your
just hit
breakfast.
her. Hi, Danny. Okay.
Maybe if the questions for those on Zoom, there is the Q&A option. So if you could write them there, because if they get in the chat, it can get lost because people like to comment.
So chat is for chat. Chat is for like, oh hey, Kelsey's lighting's so awesome. And then the Q&A is for, wait, how do we make sure we all get a fair wage? Okay.
Makes sense.
Without further ado, it's 10:05. I think we should get started. I don't have a giant grand introduction other than that I'm so excited for the work that the new Music Organizing Caucus is doing. I feel like I've been peripherally a fan from the outside, and I am so incredibly pumped to get this inside 30-minute. I feel like it's for me. I'm getting my own private tour of exactly the work and thoughts that you're having. But it's super inspiring, and so many of the conversations that we've had the last 3 days have been surrounding exactly the topics I know you folks are working on intricately and with focus. So I will mute my video, but I'll be lurking. Call on me as a kind spirit if you need me. Take it away, New Music Organizing Caucus.
Great. Thanks so much, Lainey. And thanks also to the New Music Gathering for having us. We're as excited to be here as the kind things you just said about our group. And yeah, it's great to be here this morning. Thank you everybody who's showed up to this panel. So I guess I will just dive right in. I'm David Friend. I'm a pianist based in New York City. I play with a variety of groups here and also do, solo projects, all that kind of stuff, kind of the classic new music-y freelance type. That's me. And I have been working with New Music Organizing Caucus since its early days. I'm a member of the group's wages subcommittee. And I am joined today with the fabulous Kelsey Bell.
Hello, I'm also a member of that committee, and I'm based in Brooklyn, and I'm a vocalist, composer, scholar dude. And yeah, we're excited to talk to you about the work with this database that we put together. And maybe I should just say really first off is that the Real Music Wages database is a crowdsourced anonymous list of real wage transactions reported by musicians like us, and I think everyone in this Zoom room. So it's a tool for us to use to make a database to be helpful in our financial lives.
Yeah, exactly. And so with all of that said, what is the New Music Organizing Caucus is probably a good place to start. I will do the simplest version of this, which is reading our mission statement to you. So the New Music Organizing Caucus is a community of music workers who work in the eclectic contemporary classical music creative world of quote unquote new music. We exist to advocate for decent working conditions and fair wages, to provide support against discriminatory practices, to share skills and knowledge, and to fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our field. Our goal is to use our horizontal collective power to address these systemic inequalities inherent in our field, including race, labor, class, access, and privilege, and to create a more just, kind, and honest way of making music together. Okay, so why does NMOC exist now, right? Why are we in this meeting at the moment, right? NMOC came into being amid the craziness of the last year, right? This is such a tumultuous time for all of us, but also for our society. So there's a parallel really between the formation of New Music Organizing Caucus and other organizing that happened among musicians as the COVID crisis really kicked in. Lockdown was happening, everybody was losing their gigs, you know, the big bad crisis that we were all collectively experiencing, as well as this broader social crisis that happened in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. The parallel, while these are, you know, obviously very different things, but the parallel is that both of these like sudden crises illuminated these lingering problems that had been around for a long time, right? And both spurred like a sort of huge and sudden wave of organizing amongst a broader group of people than had previously necessarily been involved or working as specifically on those issues. So NMOC is not, you know, it is responding to specific things such as the COVID crisis, but it's also interested in addressing the long-standing structural problems that have affected all of us in this field for a long time. So structurally, NMOC has a monthly meeting, and there are also the various subcommittees of the group have their own meetings depending on what they're working on. The next meeting of our group is actually dedicated to all of you, potential newcomers, to welcome them into the group, to, you know, explain what we're up to facilitate getting involved if you would like. And that meeting is on September 14th at 9 p.m. Eastern. And Dorian is going to post in the chat how you can link up to that if you want to attend. All the meetings are via Zoom, so join if you want. Okay, so the Real Music Wages database is a project of the larger, of New Music Organizing Caucus, which focuses on other things as well. It was inspired by an existing kind of similar project by the Dance Artists National Collective, which pre-existed our project. And we were really inspired by the power that their project had to really empower individual dancers to share information about the work that they do, right? The challenges that they face and the wages that they make for their work. So that was the jumping off point. And then we had a lot of discussions over numerous meetings involving a lot of people about how to implement that in a way that made sense for music and for our field. And we realized that there was no perfect way to do this, and that you know, we had to find the best solution to be most effective. And some of the discussions we had about how to form the database included the importance of anonymity. We know that we really need to protect our colleagues, and to make this effective, we need to ensure that people don't feel scared to share information about the work that they're doing, that there isn't potential retribution that could affect them or their colleagues. We also realized that the different people working in our field, whether you're a performer, a composer, whether you do arranging, etc., the nature of those different roles is you know, slightly different, and that it would be impossible to, you know, have a database that perfectly fits every individual's sort of the shape of their career. So we tried to keep things as streamlined and efficient to allow as many people as possible to participate in this project. And there were some other issues about things like collecting data. If we wanted to ask people about demographic information, which could potentially be really useful in showing certain aspects to the field, right? And perhaps certain inequities within the field. But ultimately, those questions were not included because of the fear of anonymity and other factors like that. And also about whether or not we should immediately aggregate data so that we could kind of show bigger trends that that people are sharing. And we opted not to do that as well because of concerns about misrepresentation or misleading you know, messages based on like small sample sizes and things like that. But point is, where this ended up was the result of a lot of discussions and hearing from a lot of people from different positions within the field. And that's how we got to where we are today. So I will pass off now to Gelsey, who will talk in a little bit more detail about the actual database itself.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So after all those conversations, I am going to share with you what we made and just walk you through putting an entry in there. So now I'm having that moment where I share my screen. Dun, dun, dun. And now it is shared. Okay. So here we are. And we, in simplifying everything, had tried to make it so there's just a few amount of categories, just a few questions that you have to answer before you submit a piece of data. And if you're trying to remember anything, we have a lot of explanation over on the left. So I'm going to be totally not anonymous and put in info for a gig of mine, because that'll just be the easiest way to show you, and then it can be in the database, and I haven't put it in yet. So the first thing is who paid you. And so this is for a gig I did at Greenwood Cemetery. How much? The amount. Was it a union gig or not? How long did it take? So that includes performance and rehearsals, how much time you've put into something. For this gig, I put in like around 14 hours. And maybe I should also just say this is a gig that I also curated, so I'm not including all of that time. This is like how much time it took for me as a performer. And then you add the place, Brooklyn, New York. And then if it was on tour or not. This one wasn't on tour. And then one of the ideas we kind of came up with in order to kind of personalize and give as much info as people wanted to share were this tagging system. So you just type in a tag, for instance, new music, you put it in there, and then you press enter, and then there it is. There's your little tag. So I can add some more tags of thing. Look, it helps me with the spelling. That's great. If there's certain things that you are like, well, maybe people will find this interesting, you can just make up a new tag. So for instance, with this gig, the cartage was included. So that feels like something that maybe would be helpful for people to know. So I'm just going to make a new tag with that. Okay, so I've made tags, I put in the info, submit data, it's done. It was just that easy. So we've tried to make it so you can input these things as you go along your life quickly, and it doesn't feel like this huge task because we are all too busy as it is. So now one of the other things you can do after is just look at the database. So there's a link to the database over to the side right here. You can just press it, and then all the info on the database will just come up. And so here we are in the beauty of an Excel spreadsheet, and you can see a list of organization, amounts, times, places, and tags. You can see the other kinds of tags. If there's a certain organization that you're curious about, you can check and see if there's something in there. If you are curious about, say, orchestra things, you can look for what are the things that have tags with orchestra. At this point, we have, let's see, 133 entries. So it's not a huge amount of entries, but we're getting more robust. You also see that we have a mix of geographical places, but we still have a lot of New York. We would love everyone's help to make that not so New York centric. The two New York centric people who are based in New York on this call explaining this. Yes, so let's see, what else do I want to say? I'm going to stop sharing for the moment. I guess one thing is that, so we're hoping that this database will be useful for a number of different people, useful for musicians advocating for themselves and negotiating their own contracts. useful for young or emerging musicians who are just like not sure how much people normally get paid and want to learn what that is. And useful for producers and curators who are trying to figure out what is normal. And we feel like the more data we get in this database, the more we'll be able to see kind of across field standards. And also just, how a helpful way for us to see this information so that we as musicians can also decide, well, what should our standards be? So I guess one thing I should say is I assume all of you have done gigs in your life for way less money than you deserve. And often those gigs are done for friends and things like that. So this might not necessarily be the place where you put that in there. One of the things we're really focused on is people getting paid by institutions, by nonprofits, and kind of seeing those bigger situations as opposed to, okay, I joined someone's gig at a bar and I got some of the door money and some beer. But again, that is just how we've originally built this. And the other feeling is that we want this to be a living tool. So let it change with the needs of the community. And so if it gets to a point where we need to add things or make another database that speaks to something else, letting that happen as it goes, if that makes sense. What else do I want to add? I guess one thing I will say is that it can, if you haven't put any gigs in there, it can feel a little overwhelming at first because you're like, oh, do I just put in all these gigs of many years past? I guess for me, I started doing a thing this year where I just put in all my gigs as I was doing my taxes because I had all the info right there. It was super easy. And also now that I'm very comfortable with it, if I have a gig, I can just go there, put it in and not think about it. So just like thinking through when you might want to add stuff, when you might want to look at it, how to make this useful to yourself. And the more info is put into that thing, the more useful it will be to all of us and all of our, community. The more gigs that are in there, the more useful and powerful it is. Yeah. So I think that's it.
Yeah, and so just jumping off what Gelsey was saying, and sort of shifting into questions, because we're also really interested in hearing people's feedback and questions. And as Gelsey said, this is a community project. But we really prioritize trying to make this as easy as possible because organizing musicians is hard. The structure in which we work, right, is sort of almost antithetical to the traditional methods of sharing information and organizing together that happens in most fields of labor. So we want to make this easy and we want to empower individuals and thereby empower the community at large with this simple tool. Organizing musicians is hard, but it is possible. And what it looks like is groups like this, right? And projects like this. So we're really passionate about this, the potential to really change the norms in our field through this kind of organizing, because the norms exist to a certain extent because there hasn't been organizing. They're almost accidental in many cases because there aren't standards, people don't communicate, people aren't aware, right, of broader conditions and norms across the field of new music. And this is a way that we can enhance communication, that we can see what the reality, the collective reality is, and we can use that information to empower ourselves individually, but also collectively. So with that said, we really excited to hear questions from folks, and I'm going to pass it off to Dorian, who has been keeping an eye on the questions coming in.
Yeah. What's up, y'all? First and foremost, just a quick question to Lainey. We started 5 minutes late. Are we able to go over a few minutes?
Absolutely. So you have 10 minutes left.
Cool. And then the second thing, and I guess, do I need to turn on my video? Hey, What's up,
Yeah, people
Yeah,
want to
cool.
see you.
Yeah, hey, how's it going? You're on another screen, so I'm looking off into the distance. But so first and foremost, we do have 2 questions. I did answer them in the chat, but I'm interested if David and Gelsey have their own takes on this. The first is, how are you actively addressing inclusion and equity within your organization? What I wrote, and I might be able to elaborate just a small bit more, this is something we are discussing. However, we are of the belief that it is more meaningful and more productive to support and uplift already existing groups as opposed to trying to convince marginalized groups to join our organizations. That comes off as tokenism and quota filling. So we have a lot of work to develop the safest environment possible. And at this particular point in time, it's better to utilize what resources we have to uplift pre-existing groups such as the Black Opera Alliance or the Black Composers Group or any other group like this, versus trying to pull people into a situation where it makes us feel better, but it's not actually doing anything meaningful or productive. So that's the first question, and then I'll just do this. Should I do the second question now, just to put it in?
I'm going to forget the first question. Yeah, if you
first
say
question,
the second one
how
too.
are you first question, how are you actively addressing inclusion and equity within New Music Organizing Caucus?
Yeah, I would just add to what Dorian already said that, this New Music Organizing Caucus is not a top-down organization, right? Like, we are not kind of the leaders who are dictating the policies of the group. The policies of the group are developed by its membership, right? And so it's not like we have a sort of fixed situation in which we're guided by our members, and our members are reflective of the community, but also, somewhat diverse. And in addition to that, I would say that we work in coalition with other groups that are more specifically focused on issues of equity and inclusion within the field, such as New Music Equity Action. And we have, we're in communication with them. We have overlapping membership, and we, do coordinated efforts with them at times. And then the last thing I would say is that I think this group focuses on an important aspect of equity work, which is often not a focus, which is that things like wage equity, that is inclusion work, right? Because if we're only talking about issues of identity and we're not talking about the material realities of, certain disadvantaged groups, then we're really not addressing the issues, right? So even if we're not specifically focused in all of our work on issues of equity that are related to historically oppressed or disadvantaged groups, by working on things like expanded access and working conditions and wages and those sorts of issues, we are actually doing equity work, right? Because those have a disproportionate impact on the communities that we all need to be thinking about in all of the work that we do. I wonder if Gelsey has other thoughts.
No, I think that's great. I will also say, I thought we had a committee that was working on this more specifically, but maybe we don't anymore, but we always could again. I mean, that's the beauty of a collective. But let's make sure we get to more questions.
Sorry, unmute. Yeah, so the second question, we actually have 2 questions that are really asking the same thing, which is, what do you envision that this database is being used as a negotiation tool when being offered work? And then the other one is, what is the ultimate use of this data ideally?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say part of what's really nice about knowing what like real life transactions have happened with an organization is what the standard for that organization can be. So if you're negotiating a contract and they want to give you what you think is less money, this is a database. You can look at the database, say, well, you have this precedent where you gave someone else this amount of money. I think that's what I deserve. And those kind of negotiating tactics are actually really common. So it's good to have that, knowledge. It's also nice to know if with an organization that is similar, what like a good amount would be, or it could be the kind of thing where you're like, oh, this organization doesn't pay people very well, and I can see the data on this, and therefore either I have to advocate for more, or maybe I don't want to take that gig. And it could also be the kind of thing where someone's curating for the first time and they have a budget, but they just don't have the best idea of what is a normal kind of wage to give to people. And so this is a place they can look and see that. And the hope is also that the more data we have, the more trends we can analyze in bigger ideas, either about place or kind of work, things like that.
Yeah, and I am going to jump in that another motivating factor, if any of y'all want to come check out our next meeting on Tuesday, September 14th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But we're, alongside introducing new membership, we're actually having a presentation by composer, bassoonist, and author Jamie Lee Sampson, who is in the midst of writing a book on negotiation techniques for composers and new music workers. The thing that's so bizarre about our world is that we don't have the traditional employee-employer relationship. We oftentimes will work with friends of ours, or one week one of us will be an employer and the following week we're an employee. So it gets a little complicated. We can't really strike in the same way. So there, and the other factor is there are other things aside from monetary conditions that can be met, such as, you know, the whole point is that we're trying to create an environment in which people's time is also respected. And then just one other side note, you know, one of the grand schemes, and this is just a personal vision that I know a lot of us in the group do feel, but one thing that is horrendous about our working conditions is we cannot get funding without reliance from the 1% donor class or the grant applications, which can be very demeaning in many, many ways in how we fill out these applications, or coming from wealthy families. And there are a lot of people that get left in the dust for various reasons. And one thing I would like to try to learn with this data is eventually get to a place where we can actually fund across the board for everybody involved in this field, because it is important and there's a lot of disadvantages.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback off of that as well, that some of the other things that NMOC is working on separate from this database is working in coalition with other music worker groups on specifically these issues. And you know, the situation of our field is that, you know, labor law in this country makes it extremely difficult, right, for us to organize in a traditional sort of union organizing sense, but also to really navigate our own careers in a way with that's remotely empowered, right? We don't have a universal governing body that sets wage standards and working condition standards. We don't have one organization that any musician can go to for help and support, right? Because that's not the way that labor law allows unions to function in this country. So part of this database, but also part of NMOC's broader project, is really developing an alternative that allows us to be empowered even when the system is sort of specifically set up to disempower us. So because we don't have the systemic institutions that protect us and that we can go to for support, we're creating those institutions ourselves. And one of the important first steps in creating that is gathering data, right? So that we can then collectively decide what should the norms be, right? Like what should the standards be? And so that's a key part of this project, and also one of the things we're focused on working in coalition with other music worker groups.
So we have approximately 90 seconds left, and we have 2 questions. So the one question I'm going to answer, which is, what would a negotiation toolkit look like? Come check out the meeting on September 14th, because we're still figuring that out too. And if anybody has a moment, there is can we speak on your plans to provide support against discriminatory practices? Before that question gets answered, just wanted to emphasize that there are no dues and no financial incentives for joining this organization. No, there are financial incentives for joining this organization, but there are no dues or anything, and it's completely horizontal. The moment you sign up for the mailing list, you are a member. But can you speak on your plans to provide support against discriminatory practices, and then we'll close out.
I know we don't have a lot of time, but really it's guided by both the members that are working within the group, their own experiences, but also individuals who come to the group looking for support. And that's going to guide the way that we craft initiatives and also respond. You know, we are musicians. We are working in solidarity with each other, and we're going to do what we need to do for ourselves and each other. And that you know, there's a key part of that has to do with discrimination and also, frankly, abuse. One of the problems with the fragmented nature of our field and the difficulties of organizing is that it really allows for really serious abuse to fester. And we all know of lots of terrible examples of that have been happening for generations. So we want to connect with each other to empower each other. And that helps individuals as well as the community as a whole. So we are guided by the experiences and the priorities of our membership, as well as the people who come to us for support.
And I'm going to pass it to Kelsey for the final word, and we'll close out. Thank you all.
Oh, the final word. I guess I'll just say really briefly just that, like, there's a lot of people in the group that I didn't know until I joined, and it's really like, it really is open to everyone. And as soon as you're there, you're just in it. And it's wonderful to have a supportive group that wants to work on these things as well. So I invite anyone, even if you don't know any of us, to just join us. And thanks so much for listening to us talk.
Yay! You all are so inspiring. I just wanted to quickly say, I still have tons of questions. And we have this online cafe hangout space that Danny's been in like a champ for days and days. And he's made some new friends. Right, Danny? You love it there. You love GatherTown. He does. He does. Look at him. He does. It's so cute. It's got little like plants and a little cafe with a bar and a little open mic and a patio. Anyway, it's a special GatherTown link that's linked in the schedule. And if you register, it's the same password as you used to get into this Zoom. So please, if you have questions for these beautiful humans, maybe they'll pop into the cafe. You don't know. They need a virtual coffee. Their next meeting, again, one more time, 9 p.m. September 14th on Zoom, and you've got to join that link that Dorian popped in the chat. Also on our social media, we're gonna promote that meeting too. But really, I encourage everybody to participate and give us lots more data, because data empowers us all to act. Thank you so much. You're amazing. I'm going to demote you now because we have more amazing people to talk to. Bye, friends. Okay, let's see if I know how to demote. I know how to demote. David Friend's getting demoted. And Dorian's getting demoted. And Kelsey, I love you, Kelsey, but you're getting demoted. Okay, that was a really good freeze. And now we're promoting Alyssa, and we're promoting Ashley, and we're promoting, where are you, Sarah? Sarah! And where's Megan in, and we're promoting you. And who am I missing? Where's Sarah Hoggy? Sarah Hoggy, Sarah Hoggy. I'm looking for you. There you are. Oh, I'm listening to that screaming for 3 days voice. Okay. And boom. Okay. Oh, look at this gorgeous panel. I'll just 2 seconds say I'm so incredibly pumped for this panel. Number one, because so many of you are like, you know, New Music Gathering rock stars already, so you're the family already. But just reading your description, I was like, oh yeah, how do I make like, what does it mean to make a living, and how do we think about making a living? And that's wrapped up with money, but it's not exclusively money, and you're talking about identity. Anyway, all the conversations we've been having for 3 days, you smart 5 people are about to talk about. So again, what I said to the other folks, it's recording. So are you all good with recording? Is that okay? Thumbs up? Thumbs up, thumbs up. All the people in the chat, all the attendants, what you chat will be recorded, just for posterity, for all time. And if you need, I'm gonna mute my video and audio, but I will be lurking in the chat. Just let me know if you need me for anything. We're starting at 10:40, so you're gonna go until 11:10. And if there's any questions that you don't get to, just know that you can hang out in the cafe space in Gathertown like a cool kid. I'm gonna mute myself now. Take it away, Money Mindset.
Thank you so much, Lainey. Oh my God, it's such a thrill to be here, even virtually. So I'm just gonna jump right in since we only have a half hour today. So yeah, welcome to Money Mindset. I think as I was thinking about like, how do I set up this panel this morning? I was just thinking, you know, about the past year and about the past year and a half and what it's brought to the surface. And if it wasn't clear before the pandemic, I think this past year and a half for so many of us has highlighted just how much the status quo was not working for us, like not at all, especially in the arts. And so over the past few months, the 5 of us have been talking a lot about, right, these collective stories that we've been telling each other and telling ourselves about the arts, what it means to succeed, what it means to be an artist, and what it means to make money as an artist. And so I'm so thrilled that these 4 brilliant humans have agreed to share their wisdom, and just want to acknowledge that, you know, the reason that all 5 of us are here is that we are all artists who have built successful careers adjacent to our performing work, and that allows us to thrive as artists, I think. That's one way I would describe all 5 of us. So yeah, so we're here this morning to just talk about some of the biggest collective beliefs that we've experienced as a whole that have kept us stuck in this like effed up status quo, and what we've done to shake those up in our lives. Anything you 4 want to add to that before we jump in? All right, cool. Great. Ashley, would you start us off here?
Yeah, of course. Well, Sarah, I don't think that you've officially introduced yourself. So I'm going to ask you to A, introduce yourself, and B, I would love to know, you know, for those that don't seem to be making a living as an artist, should they just quit? What should they do? So if you could take that away.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, so my very short answer, like, right, I could answer that in like 2 seconds. The very short answer is like, no, don't quit. Keep doing your art. Figure out how to make it work. And as an introduction to why I have that view, I think I have a couple degrees in singing. I had a long, you know, stint there as a performer. And then after grad school, I decided that I took a look at what the life of a young singer was like and went, I'm not going to stay sane, and decided to pivot into arts administration. And I had about a 10-year career as an arts administrator. And then recently, this past year, made another career change from administration to life coaching. So that is what I currently do. And the very brief way to describe life coaching is, right, is like I help people figure out what are the biggest stories and beliefs that they're telling themselves that might not be true, that are keeping them from accomplishing what they want to accomplish and having the life that they want. So yeah, getting back to this topic for a second, I think one of the biggest things, like the story that I bought into for so many years that I held so much shame around, was that if I hadn't made a full-time living off of being an artist, I was not an artist. I had 0 rights to call myself a singer. I could, like, those 2 degrees were completely wasted. I spent years and years and years holding this story that, like, oh, I'm not really a singer. I'm not really an artist. And it just caused a lot of heartache. So I really want us to just take a minute to try to separate these things, right? You being an artist is not the same thing as you making money from your art. And I think the thing that happens when we conflate these two is that
we get this real like scarcity mindset, right? Like if 1% of artists or even less are able to make a full-time living off of their arts, then we're always just competing for that space. If we believe that in order to be an artist, we have to be making all of our money off of it, then we're bound to stay in this space of like just survival and scarcity, and there's not enough room. And we put all this pressure on our creativity. Like creativity, I've experienced at least, doesn't do well in survival mode. So that is the thing that's the biggest idea that I think I want to bring to today, that if you are not making a full-time living off of your art, you are not a failure, right? You are not. You get to say if you're an artist or not. And I think you are an artist if you see beauty in the world, or if you have something to express, or if you just like making stuff that people call art. I think all three, many of those other things, would say that's what I want to leave you with. So I will now pass this on to Alyssa. And Alyssa, okay, how do I reconcile the notion of making money on my art with the notion of selling out?
I love that. Writing notes, I wrote notes on the last session that, hello everyone, Alyssa Jones. I'm dialing in. I'm so freaking old, dialing in from not New Orleans anymore, Tampa as of last week. God help me. This background is here because there's a wall of boxes, a wall. But to the question about not selling out, just as you were talking, Sarah, I wrote down, just reminded myself of what you said about not feeling like an artist if you're not making money full time. There's a group of folks that I convened last year. We called ourselves Quarantine Creatives, and it was largely populated by folks who were not out in the world necessarily making a full time. It was about half and half. And the most profound and beautiful work came from those who had day jobs or, were full-time something else's. And they were the most productive in that group, right? For me as a, self-identified jazz musician, even though I work in a lot of genres and compose musical theater, I'm always a jazz musician in my heart. And the shade that we throw each other, right, around that. And we know, right, if you're not out there, Ashley knows from whence I speak, we're talking about our friends out there in on Frenchmen, and we're not, right? If you're not slogging it through in that scarcity mindset, piecing together gig by gig, $40 at a time, right? Living with 3 people, 4 people in a house, and that's all you're doing, that and practicing, how much shade you throw at other people. And I wonder where that comes from, right? And I think so there are 2 things. We have to get our community to cut that out, right? Not shaming the people who are choosing to live differently, so that I have my brain and body free to make the art I want to make, right? And not put a price tag on it if I don't have to. So there's that. And then there's the other side of us, those of us who are making that choice, to be able to, can I cuss on here on Sunday morning? Is that okay? It's getting recorded.
Yes, you can.
As my dad says, put shit in your fucking bucket and walk away.
Can that be, sorry, I'm gonna make that the official New Music Gathering quote of the day. Could someone write that in the chat? Put shit in your fucking bucket?
Yeah, and walk away. Put shit in your fucking bucket. That's where it goes. My favorite Christmas present from my dad was the book, The Secret Art of Not Giving a Fuck. It's like, it's not our job to manage the shade of the people over there who are wondering how they're going to afford a can of beans. I have a cabinet full of beans, and I'm very happy about that, right? And I'm not sure if I've answered your question, Sarah, because I wrote this and then I went on a rant because it is Sunday and I have no pulpit because I'm here in Boxland. But that's kind of my story. I'm sticking to it. I know I strayed from the topic. Did I do okay? Is that all right?
I think you just had like a mic drop moment, so I don't know.
Did I really know what the question was? There's all kinds of things from the mic hitting. I can't think of anything because I just distracted myself. But anyway, that's who you're getting this morning, friends.
Can you put
New
in like a
music
1 minute
gathering friends.
introduction? Oh, sorry, to all of your brilliance, because I think we haven't totally seen that yet or gotten the background yet.
Oh, I guess you want me to say more about myself?
Yeah,
I hate that part. Okay.
love you.
So,
Sorry.
I moved to Tampa because I've just been installed as the director of vocal ensembles for University of South Florida School of Music. But I come to it not as a career conductor, but my background as a K-12 choir director, music teacher, music supervisor at the district level up in Boston. And then I ran away to join the circus of the full-time music maker, composer, and sound designer for theater predominantly, and doing a bit of art song work, commissioned art song work. And that has led me to launch my publishing company, Rising Tide Music Press. We represent exclusively Black, Brown, Indigenous, and Asian, Pan-Asian. That's why we say just Asian. We don't qualify the Asian part. It's like whatever country you're in, the Asian diaspora. And it's about composers in their first 10 years of professional work getting a break. It's a consignment shop. So you sell your work for $20, if you want to sell it for $25, that's what you're getting from us. That's it. So that's how we're kind of combating this living wage thing. So I can kick it off to Megan then. Yeah?
Thanks, Alyssa.
So Megan, Megan, what do I do if I feel like my work is too weird to be able to make money? And boy, I need you to answer this question for me, because I definitely get that a lot. It's like your work is not fit. So what's up? What's up with that?
I hear you loud and clear, Alyssa. So my name is Megan Enan. I am a mezzo-soprano who specializes in contemporary classical music for the voice, and I'm also the newly installed executive director of the Live Music Project. I hope that you all will go to LMP and put your concerts on our calendar. And I love this topic. I mean, I love talking about money with artists because it seems like it's always shrouded in all of our limiting beliefs around money, and also shrouded in mystery in a lot of ways. And listening to Gelsey and Dorian and David talk about the Organizing Caucus is just one of the things that I also love is the more that we just kind of have our open conversations about it, the less emotional, scary fear hold it has on us when we just talk about it. So particularly when it comes to new music, I thought about what was one of the limiting beliefs I had about working in new music. And one of them was, oh, what I do is too niche to be supported, to be like financially stable. And I realized that having that limiting belief was keeping me from looking around and seeing where resources were and where abundance exists. So I'm also going to keep this kind of tight, because I know that my internet connection might be a little unstable at times. But one of the things that I had to do was change how I thought about who likes what I do and how they get involved in what I do, so that I could connect that and not think, oh, it's this thing that's separate that only other musicians are going to get. Also, there is a group called, I don't know if any of you are familiar with this group called Babymetal. Does anybody know this group? Because once I realized that they were selling out stadiums, I was like, nothing is too weird. Like nothing is too weird for us to do together. So I want you to think about, that, yes, not metal for babies, but just inspired perhaps by like that, is that there are resources around you constantly. And one of the things that I had to do is switch the way that I thought about it, so that I could look around and say, who wants to be involved in making creative work that transcends boundaries and things like that? And what are the resources that other people are going to put into this to make this happen? And and going to look for them rather than that they don't exist. And thinking about it's both institutions that already exist, but also collective organizing around projects that can help forward. So I'm going to leave it. I know that my internet connection is popping in and out, so I'm going to leave it there and pass it along to Sarah, because Sarah, one of the things that I love so much about having had our relationship last however many years is having seen you walk your talk and figuring out how to go beyond living paycheck to paycheck and have savings and live a financially abundant life. So will you talk more about that?
I will. So Megan and I went to conservatory together. So we've known each other since we were wee lads and lasses. So my name is Sarah Hockey, and in my onstage world, I am a Baroque specialist, and I've done tons of new music, especially new opera. And behind the scenes, 10, 12 years ago, my financial life, my money life was a hot, stinking mess. I was deeply in debt, credit card debt, and I still had student loans hanging around like, I don't know, like they were my fourth roommate. And I started to feel this rising sensation that until I finally could sort of wrangle my whatever was going on inside of me, that all the cacophony of limiting beliefs that were hanging around, what I call money monsters. I had like a whole neighborhood of money monsters in my mind, which I'm still slaying one by one. But I felt like until I could get the negative self-talk of the money monsters telling me that I this and that, you would hear it if you listen to my podcast, that I wasn't really free to be creative and really, really, truly free on a deeper level. Like I felt like when I was on stage, if I still had to walk off stage and give that paycheck that I've worked lifelong to be able to make money at, because I was making my full-time living singing at this time. If I had to hand it to a collector, it was just not a sexy way to live my life. So I wanted to sort of match the ease and joy that I felt in my career with ease and joy off stage. And it was not matching up for a very long time. So about now it's been 5 years. So 5 years ago in April, I decided to get really gung-ho and go nuts and just finally figure it out. Because for 10 years, I had wanted to be debt-free. I'd wanted to have savings in my savings account. I'd seen other musicians that had a tiny bit of savings, and I was always like, what, how did they do that? And so I just started and made myself a promise that no matter what, I would figure it out. And so it took me about 2.5 years to pay off all my debt, but I now live debt-free. And then I saved up a rainy day fund, and then the pandemic came. So I was very fortunate to have had that journey before what none of us knew was going to happen. And my whole livelihood as a singer was wiped out, which is how I was making my living. So fast forward, during this time, a lot of people were like, how are you paying off 85 grand of debt? Like, how are you doing this? And so I started to help, and I started to get asked to help in this area. And I love talking about it. I'm very comfy, cozy talking about money, which seems like I'm a freakazoid unicorn because no artist seems to like to talk about it, but I love it. And I love talking and teaching about the really simple habits that I started. And I didn't do anything fancy, and I didn't do anything unsexy or unartistic. I literally just took a highly artistic approach because I felt like every other time for 10 years that I had tried to like write a budget or I listened to every single podcast and audiobook and read every book on personal finance. And I just felt like it was a straitjacket, and I felt like they didn't get us. I really felt like nothing out there, and it's not. It was never made for artists, and it was never made for freelancers. I was like, I don't have a salary. Like, the only thing I would do for a salary is a professorship, and I don't do that. I sing for a living. How can this be an artistic approach to personal finance that meets who I am as a creative person and is creative? And so I just invented my own way, and people like it. So I teach that now. And I just became obsessed with answering the question, how do I stop living paycheck to paycheck? Because the paycheck to paycheck lifestyle that so many of us freelance artists live drains our creativity, and it's undeniable. We all know it does. It's like putting water in a bucket that has holes in it. And if we're I found that I was constantly using a lot of energy on building my career and making a living as an artist and living life in New York City, which takes a lot of energy, that if I wasted all of my creative energy worrying about money and worrying about how I was going to pay next month or the month after's rent, I was not really creatively free. And so I knew I had to solve the question of, how do I cure paycheck to paycheck living forever? And then solve the question, how do I get out of debt? Because I hate being in debt. I feel like shame and guilt around it. How do I heal that shame and guilt? How do I heal my finances? And then finally, the last chapter of, how do I actually build savings and not always, sure, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, sure, I'm out of debt, but how do I have enough set aside so that if all of my income is wiped out, I am still okay. And I can at least be okay, and at best still be creative. And so I just became obsessed with answering those questions. And it starts with my go-to answer after one season of my show, To Rise Together, the podcast, where I answer all these questions in like a how-to silly and ridiculous format, is we have to get brave enough to silence the money monsters and actually start to actively engage in the process. Like, just like being a soprano, what I am, it's like, if I just sat around on my couch for the last 15 years and didn't actively engage with the process of music, how would I ever solve the question of, how do I become a professional soprano? It only came through active engagement. And the same thing is true secretly behind the scenes of that life when we get off stage or out of the rehearsal room, or we close the iPad or our music on the piano when we leave the practice session. How do we do it? Is we start to actively engage with it in a fun, approachable way that doesn't suck and doesn't feel like a straitjacket and doesn't carry all the shame and weight of beating ourselves up for all the mistakes we've all made, especially me, personal finance. So I hope that answers those questions. I'm going to drop a link to my podcast in the chat if anybody's curious. And this is a free video. It's really fun. It literally has a confetti bomb in it that I made if you want to use my Post-it note approach to making your first plan. But if you just want to hear me noodle on ideas of how to like heal our inner child and money, and it's a very healing approach to money, go listen to the podcast. It's very silly. So I would like to pass it to Ashley. And my question for Ashley is, which I'm obsessed with now, what's considered good money for my work?
Thanks, Sarah. I love digging into this topic. First, I'll give a quick little introduction to myself. I'm a trombonist and a vocalist, and I help support numerous arts organizations. So to the point that Sarah Noble had made earlier about don't devalue yourself and view yourself differently just because you can't make full-time income from being an artist. I also support myself by working with mostly music education-based nonprofits. And so I'm the director of operations and programs for Trombone Shorty Foundation. I work with the New Orleans Jazz Museum. I work with Upbeat Academy Foundation. I do some work with my colleague, Sonia Robinson, over at Artist Corps New Orleans. And so do a little bit of everything. And that's okay. That is perfectly okay. But as we think about good money for our work, I want to talk a little bit about how good money, and I'm going to put this in quotes, it is considered the same as it was at least 20 years ago, perhaps more than this. And that is mind-boggling. And when I say that, I mean, I think about how many of us might say, oh, I'm going to take this gig if I make at least $100 on it. And David just commented in the chat, the $100 gig. Like, we have all had the $100 gig. And this is what we consider good money. And part of this is really around the tipping mindset. I just want to note that the history of tipping is linked to racial oppression. It is something that has been a set wage since the New Deal of $2.13, and that is abysmal. And so as we move ourselves forward into thinking about this money mindset and dealing with the money monsters and everything of the like, we need to be thinking about how we move ourselves over from what the federal government views as a quote unquote living wage and move ourselves into a thriving wage. So this involves thinking about what our actual needs are. What do you need to survive and to live and honestly to thrive? Not just survive. Let's move ourselves from surviving to thriving. So give yourself that space to understand what thriving means for you. And for everyone, that's going to be different. And so setting yourself up for what your year might look like, and then working yourself backwards into what an actual hourly wage would be. Working yourself backwards into, I put in this much time into practicing, into rehearsing, into making my art, and so I deserve this amount of money. Move yourself beyond that $100 gig, because again, this practice it's all linked to racial oppression, and it is something that has just been deeply ingrained, that white supremacy digging in really deep and us accepting it as artists. And so moving yourself forward, thinking about things about how you are paying yourself equitably from grant budgets, how you are pulling in things from other work that you're doing. Maybe it's private lessons, maybe it's beyond the gig work. So thinking about how you're setting yourself up for success so you're not falling into the trap of what our standard conceptions of what good is really looks like. And so, with that all being said, I know we only have about 4 minutes left, so that was like a quick little touch on it. So I think it's question time, if I'm not mistaken. Questions from the chat.
Yeah, put in your questions to the chat or in the Q&A feature if you have anything you want to know more about. I will also put in, because we knew we only had a half hour, 4 of us did a podcast. Megan was really generous to share her space with us. And so we will share the link to that podcast. It's like an hour and a half of us talking about all of this. And we're also going to share a folder that has some additional resources, some way to contact us if you want to pick up the conversation from here. Okay, I see. How do you feel about working for free when some of your other hats pay your living wage? Oh, that's a great question. Anybody have something on that?
I'll jump in here,
Thanks,
which is really quickly, which is, I think that if you always get to live your values and how you price your work. If it's within your value structure that something else is being the abundance and the resources, if you're bringing that to the table, then that's fine. If you're doing it, but you don't feel in alignment with that, then we shouldn't be doing that, and we shouldn't be use that to fund our projects when we can all work together to find different ways. And I feel very strongly about what I consider exchange of value. So that means any type of resources is what we do together. And there's a big difference between exposure and exchange of values. So I'm just going to pop that out there for us to talk more about.
I love that exposure versus exchange of value. That hits it on the head. That's one of the things I'm going to when it soundbites, I'm going to walk away with from this, is exposure versus exchange of value, because it really does boil down to that.
And I'll pop in for a second. One of the things that was on my mind 5 years ago when I started slaying all my debt and everything, was that I wanted to be able to say yes to gigs not for the money. What I was getting paid great money to sing, and I sometimes didn't, it wasn't my first priority artistically. And so I wanted to be able to probably not, I don't know if doing it for free, but I want to be able to create my first Baroque album and things like that. And when we get in a place behind the scenes with our money life that has stability baked in and is the lifestyle that we want, gives us the freedom of time, that huge privilege, to be able to work on the things that we're really passionate about, then we can be proud of whatever projects we're doing, no matter how the bills are getting paid, as long as it's all in alignment with, like what Megan said, our values and dignity, and it feels dignified and honors our immense skill set that we've all invested in for now probably 20 years. Then it feels good to do the project and the bills are already paid in a different way. So we can also reframe our mindset in that way. And what I got caught in is a cycle of doing great gigs that were great for my resume, but it wasn't really the music I want to use the prime years of my voice on. So that we can also start to think about our careers and our livelihood as a greater whole in that way.
Yeah. Any other last thoughts, or that feels like a pretty good place to wrap?
I'm gonna dig in for just to say, I love you all so much, and the idea of coming at this with joy and a positive attitude instead of the like, money, I'm gonna cry. Gosh, I hope that's the feeling a lot of people are starting to have in more open and frank conversations, which leads me to the Gather Town Cafe. The joyful, frank conversations. We talked salaries. We talked salaries and tax brackets in the Gather Town at a very early morning hour. It was fantastic. So please, everyone, if you haven't registered, register, get your password, go chat in the Gather Town. I'm afraid we have to go because there's an amazing concert happening right now over in the YouTube NMG live stream. I don't know which window it's going to be. But thank you so much to this incredibly smart panelist. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, all of you, for making a podcast. I already linked in our Facebook and our social media directors, Mary and Angelica, when they land. They're going to pop it in our other social media as well. The link to that podcast that we can all listen to. But you're also inspiring, and we love listening to your music, and we love listening to your brains. So thank you. Thank you both panels for being awesome. Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye. I'm gonna do it in 3, 2, 1. Bye.